Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, the recap of stage 10 of the Giro d'Italia, a 28.6 kilometre long time trial from Lucca to Pisa. Yes, where the Leaning Tower of Pisa is, and we had some variable weather today. 2 intermediate time checks in Ponte Tetto and Asciano. There's a little hill, but this is mostly a flat TT, much more technical than even I thought. I knew it came out of they're unfurling a damp piece of spaghetti to get onto the straight roads towards Pisa, but actually it was very technical to start to get out of town, and then there was fast sweeping bends down a short hill, but actually then there's this long out of T2 from Asciano to the entry of Pisa, a long straight section of like 4 or 5 Ks next to some sort of viaduct, I think it is. Some sort of Roman irrigation system.
Mate, you just spoke about the Tower of Pisa, but we gotta talk about you towering over your desk right now. For the people that are listening on podcast players, this man is looking tall right now. Have you finally gone through your puberty growth?
Yeah, well, we were near Turkey, so I got the leg extension surgery in in honor of Dan Hola. I believe he's the tallest man in this Giro d'Italia at 196 or 2 meters or something. So, I'm
about 90 centimeters taller than you.
Exactly. About 95 centimeters taller than me. And then we finish in Pisa, a few corners. But the weather today, it's all about the weather. In the morning, there was wet conditions when they were doing the recon. So Ethan Hayter said it quite well in his post-stage interview that you want to be... they mark down every corner in the extensions or in the bull bars, how much they have to brake beforehand. They're doing that all on wet corners. And then Hayter and the other non-GC guys, they went in the dry, and he said he could have given it a bit more gas through the corners. But in that recon, Benji, we saw coming out of basically people from the side of the road that Primož Roglič had crashed in the recon of this TT.
Exactly. It was mentioned on Twitter a couple of times. I think Cycling News might have been the first report of it properly, where we saw basically an Instagram reel of Roglič standing up from a crash with a picture of him laying on the floor. A few hours later, we actually saw footage of the crash, which was posted on Twitter as well. So credits to the individual that posted it, Stefano Bernardini. Thank you very much, sir, because otherwise we wouldn't have seen the action. And it's basically Roglič turning into what looks like a 90-degree corner to the right. And yes, it's relatively wet conditions. And we see him turning into that corner. But as soon as he's turning into that corner, he's already kind of like crashing. It's like very early on in the corner, you know. So are we looking at someone that went too fast into the corner? Are we looking at someone that braked too hard in the corner? What scenario are we looking at here?
He just came into the corner way too hot for the wet conditions, and he slid out. He didn't even make... It's not like he made the apex of the corner and then his tyres were too acute an angle. He just... he crashed before the corner because when he braked, he slipped away. So came in way too hot. Maybe a blessing and a curse. He got the crash out of the way, so he didn't do it in the real thing. But also not good. I mean, he's going down bare hands. Luckily, it was wet. He slid, but he also hit the ground on it. I think luckily it was on his right side, and most of his bandages, from what I saw in the Strata stage, was on his left side. So maybe he's just bouncing, and he wanted to be symmetrical. If you got a hematoma on your left hip. I mean, Dan Bigham he's a brilliant guy. So I think what happened is Dan Bigham, he's decided that for aerodynamic purposes, he needs to match the hematoma on his left hip from the gravel on his right, and that's actually why Roglič also did a good TT today.
Was Dan Bigham also responsible for the aerodynamic nose of Bernal then?
Oh yeah, back in the day at Ineos when Bernal, I think that was to help his breathing. But yeah, it was crazy. Remember that off season, Bernal came back looking different.
Anyway, back to this recon crash. We didn't see any major consequences from Roglič immediately, so he got back on the bike, finished his recon. We saw some Strava titles from, I think it was Timon Arensman on Strava. Luke pointed this out, that Timon basically said ice skating from Lucca to Pisa, so it was pretty slippery according to the riders during the recon. So the tone was set, is I think fair to say, for this time trial. And I gotta say, early on in this time trial, not necessarily the slippery roads. Yes, there were wet conditions at the start of the time trial, but it started getting worse and worse as the time trial went on, right?
Yeah, it looked like the wind was gusty or variable. And we also had not just consistent rain, but rain for a bit, made the roads wet, or was raining really heavily on some riders, and then 10 minutes later it would stop.
Yeah.
So the weather affected this TT a lot. And so I'd say the the best slots was the non-GC guys early. And that was, Affini, Holt, Darnola, Josh Tarling, although I think he might have had a little bit more headwind, and Michael Hepburn, even Ethan Hayter, they had the best time slots early. Luke Plapp, but then it got worse. It got worse with maybe the wind, and then it got much, much worse with the rain. And basically, this TT ended up being guys coming 15th at the end is like a great time because you're surviving the conditions. And what I'm grateful for, at least, is that to a certain extent, although most of the GC guys go off in the same window, if this happened in an opening TT, although the teams can choose where their riders go, it could have been really, really different between the two riders. Although Roglic got the best of it, I would say.
We'll get to that. Let's talk about the early action first, because at the start of the time trial, we saw multiple riders that are not GC riders do relatively well. And you mentioned quite a few of those riders already, like the Affinis of the world, Ethan Hayter doing relatively solid in this time trial. But it was actually Dan Holle that set a really good time from the start. And Dan Holle, in his past, gotta say, his time trials have been solid, but it's never been a performance like this, in my opinion, either. So I was like, okay, that was a very good time trial by this man. So we're looking at this time trial. We're continuing. I'm like, okay, Josh Tarling's going to start. Tarling is probably going to be Dan Holle here. Tarling starts. Okay. Tarling does not beat Dan Holle at the finish, but there's a few things we need to mention here. Dan Holle did have some benefit from proper drafting before the second time check, in my opinion, from the cars of his Minutemen. Then Tarling did get hindered by Honoré in a specific corner in the second half of his time trial. Basically, Honoré was the rider he was supposed to pass, but then two corners came along, and in those corners, he couldn't pass Honoré and had to kind of tell Honoré with his shoulder, come on, mate, get out of the way, I need to pass. And do we know what the rules are in that situation? Because I actually don't know. Like, is that rider, Honoré, supposed to go to the side because Tarling is entitled to have the road, or are they not obliged to?
No, there's no way. People
Shouldn't
are allowed to
they?
do their own TT. I think it probably technically, I think it's on Tarling.
I think so too.
The sort of the laws of the unwritten rules is that if a rider in front is not trying for the stage or GC, they hop out of the way through a technical section. And what commentary corrected was that apparently Honoré only had neutral service with him because this TT is so long. It's 35 minutes long, 40 minutes long. There's barely enough TV cameras or motorbikes to show the right riders on the course because so many are on the course at one time. And EF, I think, they couldn't have a car with maybe all three riders at once on the course. But yeah, it holds Tarling up. I gotta say, I find it really strange how these riders go to the wind tunnel for so long. They invest time, money from the teams, and then they're wearing jewelry. And Tarling loses, okay, you can point to Honoré, maybe to change a headwind, whatever. That bike is like probably €50,000 bike or whatever with all the custom stuff on it for him. Maybe they tested it in the wind tunnel, but when you lose by 6 seconds over 35 minutes, I'm like, what? Surely the rings are not air. And same with Peacock. Peacock stars with the chain dangling out. I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I don't get it. Maybe they're more aero to have the rings.
Maybe the spiritual motivation from the rings. That's
and that's important too. You know, the mental stuff is important too. It's just if it costs you
logically, it does make
0.01%,
sense.
yeah.
But that's the start of this time trial. Again, the tone is set. Those riders are the first couple of riders in the standings. Dan Holle is in the hot seat now after Tarling is not able to beat him at the finish line. This means that Dan Holle will have to wait for a long time now because from this point until the GC riders, there's barely any riders that really are contentious for the victory, I would say. We had a Jay Vine that came pretty close. Go on, sorry?
It was done. As soon as
Did we know already that the conditions would get worse? Yes.
Yeah, but they're not going to beat Tarling's time. Let alone if Dan Holer beat Tarling, who didn't have a mech.
Yeah.
They're not going to beat Dan Holer. He's like
you never know.
You never know. You never know. That's true, but I knew. So
most likely no. You're right.
Jay Vine had a mech.
Go ahead.
So he had a mech to T1. Puncture changed it reasonably fast, but who knows how long he was riding with a rear puncture before he realized if it was a slow leak. And Jay Vine, correct, I believe he might have been the quickest from T1 to the finish of anybody. And so he was visibly frustrated over the line, and rightfully so, because I think he could have run very, very close. I mean, he still came in this TT 6th.
Yeah.
Is he winning? Maybe not.
Seconds? I wouldn't
He also
say
had to do the
but...
whole TT, the rest of the TT with no head unit, no pacing. And mentally, it's not great to have a mech. So
definitely close to the podium.
Definitely. But yeah.
But now we're going towards GC riders. And the benefit of Roglic crashing and losing time on the gravel stage is that he's now starting in a slightly different time slot as the other riders, as the other GC riders, because he's like 10 riders before the other riders to start. So that's something we need to keep in mind. But now we got to talk about how the weather conditions started changing, because when Roglic went on the road, the first 6-ish kilometers, 6, 7 maybe, was relatively dry conditions. But then the weather changes and it starts raining. So for me, Roglic starts his time trial in relatively dry conditions and spends his first 7 kilometers in the ride. Did you feel like it was drying out towards the end for Roglic?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was drying out, maybe not actively raining compared to some others. I think of those guys, he had good conditions. G had good conditions. And yeah, Roglic does I'd say a good time trial. We're trying to see a benchmark. What's a good TT for the conditions? We can't benchmark Roglic against Jay Vine, who went in good conditions. We're like, what's a good time? And I guess G and Roglic did pretty good times. But that was actually only good enough for 14th and 17th overall. And then the rain gets much, much worse. Simon, around like the 7th GC guy, Simon Philip Yates, Ayuso, Del Toro, Tiberi, Bernal, Carapaz, they're going, it's raining cats and dogs in places. We see the last section, that straight section near the water feature. That's really where TTs were made or broken for these riders. And we saw that Del Toro, for example, I'm picking him out. He was 88th from T2 to the finish. Now that's partially wind, that's partially rain, that's partially pacing. The smaller riders on a good TT like Yates was 42nd, but then the units like Derek G, he's 11th. Godon 12th in the same, not the same slot, and yeah, Vine was like second there. So that really made or broke people's TTs. I should say then, yeah, the top 10. Dan Holer wins this TT comfortably, actually, 7 seconds. I mean, it's not comfortably, but you knew by the final turn. 52.8 kilometers an hour average, Tarling 52.6, so really fine margins. You know, these are really not just 1%ers. We're talking 0.01%ers here. Not sure if that's correct maths. Hayter third, that's his best result, I'd say, this year on 10 seconds. Catania fourth on 23 seconds. I think he had a decent weather slot. Affini, he had a good weather slot. I think he'd be a bit disappointed. 24 seconds. Jay Vine, 37 seconds. Plapp, I think Plapp went out to win and had a pacing plan to win, and then he blew up because he was 6th at T1. He was pushing the corners. He was 8th at T2, and he finishes, 7th, but his T1 to T2 was not so good. And then to round up the top 10, Frigo, really, really good, 47 seconds. Hepburn, 9th, 50 seconds. Asparen on 50 seconds rounds out the top 10. Before we move to the GC guys there, Benji, big upset. Dan Holer. He wouldn't have been, he was not the favorite today.
Definitely wasn't the favorite. So I like seeing it. It's a rider that we've seen grow over the last couple of years, from a rider that was a good roller to showing up in the classics and the leadouts. Remember vividly that he was a lead out in Algarve maybe 2 years ago already, and then we started seeing him more and more as a proper, what do you call it? Like a robust man at the front of the peloton. Unit. That's the word you use. Dan Holle, the unit at the front, and he's made his way into, I'd say, the first team in many places at Utrecht. So he's becoming a better and better rider. His climbing at the start of this year was actually pretty good in the opening stages as well. Was a prominent domestique there for Mes Pedersen, and to see him win this time trial is very nice. At the end of the day, yes, the conditions had an effect. The Minutemen might have had an effect. Stuff like that might have had an effect. But at the end of the day, he put himself in the position where he was probably the strongest rider in the race today compared to with Tarling. And yes, maybe one or two things happened throughout the race, but he's won the time trial. At the end of the day, Tarling also benefited in the first time trial from having a Minuteman, and otherwise he might not have won that time trial. So that stuff like that is part of a time trial. And yeah, I'm happy to see Dan Holle have this breakthrough Grand Tour victory. And I wonder if this is a start for more of those to happen, because like he was sixth in the first time trial. Is it me, or I low-key expected Holle to be better in shorter prologue style time trials versus longer time trials?
Nah, he's like Fortnum and Mason's de Klerk.
Who? What?
Yeah, like Dan Holle he can't sprint to save his life. Like he's got no explosivity. He really struggled to win. He's a diesel. Yeah, he really struggled to win a road stage. But the first sign he was different this year was Jebel Jais in UAE Tour, where he survived so long. I was like, this reminded me of like a Mikkel Bjerg style performance, where you're too big to still be here. You must be pushing a shitload of power for 30 minutes, and he must have been. And then he was solid in the classics. He got crashed into a ditch on, maybe, I can't remember, Gent-Wevelgem or Omloop.
20 in Roubaix.
Yeah, 17. I mean, in Roubaix, good. Trek were good in Roubaix. And the first TT was solid, and this is just a progression of that. The longer the TT, his 30 to 60 minute power, absolute power, obviously can push a shitload. And it's not a 55 kph course. And also, he paced it better.
Yep.
Like, I think to T1, he was fifth. T2 to the finish, he was third. T1 to T2, he was first, but not by a decent margin, actually. But I think Tarling went out too hard. Tarling went 17 seconds quicker than Dan Holle in the first 10 minutes. That's too fast.
It's like from the T2 to the finish is really where you also see their difference for me, where a Tarling and a Wout kind of fall off a cliff a little bit compared to Holle, in my opinion. And that's maybe a follow-up of going out of the start too fast then for Tarling. But it's nice to see that. But I'm also happy about some other riders in the top 10. Like, I'm happy to see Ethan Hayter prominently in the time trial once again. It is not a crazy thing to say that Ethan Hayter has the ability to win a World Tour time trial right now and could do that for Soudal Quickstep this year. Whether it's through the Polonia, whatever, it's possible. He's been close quite a few times, and I swear he was close at the World Championships where he punctured or something some while ago as well, a few years ago. That might have been the U23 World Championships. I don't remember, to be honest. But that being said, also, Marco Frigo, I know, I called him for stage 8. Didn't work out. I'm feeling him for tomorrow. We'll get to that in a second. Like, Marco Frigo, my man is cooking. And I reckon he was ruined more by being caught up in split in stage 8 than by actually, like, physically not being all right. Because he's been good in his time trial. He's a good old race. I'm feeling something when it comes to Marco Frigo. But before we continue, we have to talk about GC riders a little bit. We've spoken about the conditions of Roglic, which was dry at the start, then wet in the middle, which has the uphill and the downhill segment. That wet descent was horrible for Vodsik. That's where he was like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. That's where he stopped trying for the...
Well, yeah, because he was second. He was second at T2 ahead of Dan Holle.
And then he went super slow in that descent, and then lost so much time towards T2, and towards the finish, he was just rolling it in at that point. And we see Roglic doing a 30 seconds down at first time check, then about 56-ish seconds down at T2. So at the 30 seconds behind at T1, I was like, okay, this doesn't look that great, because he rode most of that in dry conditions. And then the last 2K before T1, he must have lost quite a bit of time in the wet conditions. But then between T1 and T2, he actually sets a pretty damn decent time. So I'm looking at the final, basically T2 until the finish, where Roglic keeps it up quite well again to maybe 1:14 or something. I think he had at the finish line. Is that correct, Roglic?
Yeah, Roglic was on 1:15, I think, to Darnhola. Some of the... I don't like when they don't have a uniform, like, intermediate check. They'll show Roglic against Ayuso, then they'll show Roglic against Darnhola, then they'll show Roglic against the guy that was leading at T2, etc. But yeah, Roglic, I think we were all... It was pretty clear that he set a good time. In those weather conditions on 1:15, he's beaten guys like Cherney, he's decent, who had the best slot. I think G had a better slot than Roglic, and he's good on these sort of TTs, only beat him by 15 seconds. So it was a good TT from Roglic. It's not his Olympics crazy TT,
yeah.
But also probably a good thing that he just doesn't crash and takes time. That was the order of the day. Start to take some time back, build on it, don't crash, and he did that. He executed that. And in terms of the GC gaps,
well,
yep.
Before we say
he did crash, yeah.
Yeah, well, also true. But I want to point out, it wasn't that certain that he would take time back after his time trial. Because when Ayuso was on the road, initially it looked like that towards T1. Ayuso was losing time towards T1. Yes, Ayuso rode in wetter conditions in T1, so that's important to mention here. But then the middle part of Ayuso's time trial was drier on the climb. And that's where we see Ayuso taking time back on Roglic to the point that he's suddenly ahead of Roglic at T2. And then I'm like, okay, Ayuso is going to take time on Roglic now. But then Ayuso enters that last part of the time trial where, just like you mentioned earlier, there are parts of this time trial where TTs are made or broken. For Ayuso, it was broken in the last segment because the rain was so significant that he lost so much time in the last 2 kilometers. He ends up losing 19 seconds to Roglic in this time trial. So how much, if you look at just this, before we jump into GC gaps here, if you look at just Roglic and Ayuso, do we learn anything from this time trial?
Roglic has got the weather gods back on his side. He's getting his bad luck out of the way. I mean, Ayuso lost 31 seconds to him in 10 minutes in that last 10 minutes, in the last stretch. 31 seconds when he was flying before. Now, maybe he went out too hard because Del Toro's pacing is actually very similar to Ayuso's pacing in terms of they were good T1 to T2 and then T2 to finish bad. They also got terrible weather. So it might just be that they had the worst downpour on them at that. Because I don't believe that Ayuso on a flat section of road there is pushing less power than Simon Yates. It's just even if he's blowing up, I just don't see it. And he loses 7 seconds to him. So the weather hurt him, unfortunately. And remember, it's 3-minute gaps. Between the top 10, it's 3-minute gaps. It's not like they're 1 minute after each other on the road. But yeah, I'd say that's a strike back for Roglic, but not a huge one. Not a huge one either. I mean, the gaps now, Luke has put them together, thankfully. I said do it from, apologies to Max Poole and Derek G, but we're doing it from Roglic. Aronsman loses 13 seconds to Roglic. Ayuso, 19 seconds. Simon Yates, the best Clermont Brazafonso member of my club, enjoyer of the day, 28 seconds. It's an excellent TT. Tiberi, 38 seconds. I think the wet hurt some riders more than others, and Tiberi didn't seem to relish it. Caruso, 39 seconds. We're back, boys. Del Toro, 107. I think that's bad. Like, compared, he's 5 seconds quicker than Yates, who he's got 8 kilos on. I'll go further. Pidcock clearly tried, 113, but a bit of a better weather slot. Piganzoli, 114. Gadu, 117. Stora, 118. Ciccone, 133. And Bernal, who apparently crashed, and then a subsequent mechanical perhaps, 143. Obviously a terrible time, but perhaps it was mostly from the crash.
And to be honest, when we look at the consequences for GC then, Del Toro still has his Maglia Rosa. He's got 25 seconds left on Ayuso, his teammate, so inner team drama incoming maybe? Or a strategy against Roglic, because while Tiberi's still sitting in third on a minute 01, Simon Yates moves up to 103 in 4th place. Roglic is 5th on 118, and that's the gap I want to talk about for a second. That's a lot less bad looking than it was after the gravel stage, right?
Yeah, I mean, Roglic just struck straight back, and he's knocking at the door again, because I think Roglic, he cares more about, and Ayuso obviously, but Roglic cares more about the gap to Ayuso, not to Del Toro. I think he thinks he can dispense with Del Toro. If he's going to win this Giro, he needs to be, if he can beat Ayuso, then he'll be beating Del Toro, I think.
Yeah.
I like Del Toro. Is he the next coming of Poggi? Yeah,
No.
Poggi comes top 10 in this TT today. So I'm talking, and I'm not talking this Poggi, I'm talking 2020 Poggi, or Vuelta 2019 Poggi is what I'm referring to. He does a much, much better TT today. Now, whether that's just irrelevant for the upcoming mountain stages on a road bike, I don't know. I don't know. But
Actually, Tadej Pogacar came 11th in his 2019 La Vuelta podcast, time trial. But still,
we should take
points still stand. Jesus, nah, I'm not in that. But what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean that is a pretty shit TT, isn't it? Yeah, but where's the next one?
It's 2020, right? The next one?
Let me have a look. Next TT you did in 2020.
Well, it was a Slovenian ITT, so...
Yeah, we're skipping that one. Then what, the Dauphiné didn't have one?
It's working on. Planche de Belfi was the next one.
Dude, Planche de Belfi, that one was pretty good. Exactly. So, I'll say Del Toro did do a Planche de Belfi TT today.
So, what you're saying is that Del Toro might do a Planche de Belfi TT next year?
Yeah, if there was Lusari, if they had... instead of the Rome stage, they had Lusari, maybe he still have his moment. But today, he didn't have the Planche de Belfi TT, I'm afraid. But yeah, for GC, he's still got... At one point, I thought he was losing the jersey because if Ayuso stayed on track and didn't lose all that time in the final 10 minutes, he was taking pink back, which would have been kind of funny. There was some, we didn't mention it, but on the rest day in the interviews, he was throwing a paper airplane. They did the, everyone knows the famous photo of the trident leadership at Movistar. It was Landa, Carapaz, Quintana, and there are three of them in the bus. Or was it Valverde?
Was Valverde? No, it was Landa, Quintana, and Valverde, right?
Because Carapaz already onto Sky.
Because Moz was still on Quick Step, right?
Yeah, it was Valverde, Quintana, Landa, and they had Valverde pretend to like massage the legs of Landa. And but this time they had him matching, flanked by Ayuso and Del Toro, and there's a screen grab that went viral on Twitter of Ayuso throwing a paper airplane. Nah, probably he's just bored because people are asking stupid questions for 40 minutes on his rest day when he wants to have a nap. But it was a funny screenshot because he looked like, fuck this. But yeah, he almost took pink back today. And
I'm less scared of Del Toro if I'm Red Bull after today. That's for sure.
Yeah, me too.
If they were already scared of him in the first place. And there's definitely terrain for Primož Roglic if he's the better climber to take that time back in the mountains. But that's going to be something we'll look at. And did we learn anything from other podium competitors outside of Roglic and Ayuso? Because I agree with you that the time trial of Simon Yates has been really good. And throughout the week, he's been quite solid as well. And I heard that someone in the vlog yesterday on the Lanterne Rouge podcast YouTube channel might have mentioned that he wants to go home with the Maglia Rosa or has to come home with the Maglia Rosa. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, go and check out the LRCP vlog to see what I said we've been offered free shots of local liquor. So
45% alcohol.
I can't be held to it, but yeah, go check out the vlog on the LRCP YouTube channel. So yeah, I think not a disaster for UAE. I think Ayuso held it, but I think Roglic is the happier of the two today. Indeed, Tiberi, I think, would have wanted to... This would have been a TT where Tiberi wants to take more time on someone like Simon Philip, not lose time to him. I think the winners of the day from the maybe fringe top 10 guys is the guys who struggled on stage one. Aronsman and G both got dropped on stage one. They both take a lot of time, and Aronsman's now ahead of Bernal. He's into the top 10 on 227. Derek G moves up 8 spots to 237, and he's within 30 seconds. G is within 37 seconds of 6th, and his goal will be top 10, I would say.
But I am of the opinion that because we have not entered the mountains yet, the proper mountains, we've got a skewed view of GC where the people that are between 8 and 12, maybe even the ones from 13 to 15 to 17 as well, those are riders that usually in the last week of a Grand Tour, when they're 5 to 7 minutes behind, try to go in the breakaway and suddenly jump up to 16 GC, suddenly up to 17 GC. I feel like that's still very much possible in this scenario. And I do expect the gaps to expand first in the next couple of mountain stages, which that's most likely going to be the start of week 3, to be honest, to then allow these riders to launch back up in the final few mountain stage. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking at Ina Rubio on 4 minutes. He hasn't had a good climb for him yet. He's a diminutive 55 kilo climber. Yeah, he's hunting breakaway. And then who's going to control him?
Yeah.
So, and it's up to then the guys in the top 10 to control him. And you have that washing effect of he does it one day, then the next day it's Piganzoli, then the next day it's Bilbao, Pellizzari.
Michael Storer.
Yeah, Storer, exactly. I mean, Storer, I think he's a bit too good almost. Chris Harper, 318. Pidcock, 341. Pidcock, by the way, it is funny. It is funny that, he left Ineos because they, made him ride boring for GC. And then he's here, not losing time to maybe get a top 10.
Yeah, that's exactly the case that's ongoing at the moment. Then, gotta say, Damiano Caruso might be just too close to make that GC move into the top 10.
Caruso can do this from the GC group. He doesn't need that breakaway shit.
He's actually the guy that does it from the breakaway often.
No, he'll just find the climb that's got the most dangerous descent on it in the wet, where the other riders are trying to neutralize the race at some point coming up, and he'll just send it with Bilbao, and there's nothing you can do about it.
If the organizers neutralize it, then he'll be pissed on the podcast.
Of course. Oh, he will be. But he will do that. Other GC gaps. Yeah, McNulty and Yates somehow move up in GC spots. They both do really bad TTs. Now, McNulty's very injured, so he crashed badly from what I could see in Siena, and also the rain wouldn't have been his friend, but both of them do bad TTs. They nearly lose 3 minutes, but somehow they move up on GC, mainly because Ciccone, Carapaz, and Bernal had shockers. And, 6th in GC to 9th is separated by 10 seconds. And then there's a second grouping, 3rd, 4th, 5th are separated by 17 seconds to Berry, Yates, Roglic. What do UA do, Benji? Let's talk about that in the context of tomorrow's stage. Congrats to Dan Holler. Tomorrow's stage, from Viareggio to Castelnuovo nei Monti, 186 kilometers long. It's a very hard stage by this Giro standards that doesn't have 250k traditional stages. It's got the longest, hardest climb of the race so far, which wouldn't be hard, called the Alpe San Pellegrino.
Nah, it's actually hard.
Yeah, no, it's actually hard. 13.8k's at nearly 9%. Category 1 climb. It's even got a little descent in there, so I dare say there's some kilometers in there that are much steeper than 9%. The problem is, it's 90k's from the finish. And
that's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem for me is that if you want to attack early on a climb like that, you want satellite riders up ahead so you don't have to do everything alone from that point onwards. And at the start of the parkour, there's a 3-kilometer climb at 4%. Not much more than that. So there is not much to put your breakaway riders up the road to then jump with Carapaz, for example, who would be the El Jaguar man for this parkour, to make that raid. He's the man that would do stuff like this. There's just no way I see a breakaway having enough of a gap to make it over the top of that, to then attack with Carapaz towards that and benefit like that. So I think we might have a disappointing GC action tomorrow in just the breakaway stage.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It should be 215k's with not extra mountains, with another 30 kilometers of a few light hills at the beginning to give 110k's before the Alpe San Pellegrino. And the only way the break wins this stage is if it goes quick and clean in the first 10k's. There's a 3k 4.4% climb. After that, it's absolute flat for 50 kilometers. And if there's a long break fight and the break goes on the second little hill at 3.6k, 6%, that's only 18k's before the real climb starts. Yeah, you're not going to get ahead of the GC group. So the breakaway, if it wants to have any chance, it's got to go quick on that first hill and then hope that the peloton all has a nature break and lets them out to 5, 6, 7 minutes, because afterwards there's a rolling descent with a plateau in the middle of about 15 Ks. It's pedaling downhill, and then the descent ends, and there's some rolling hills. 11 Ks, 5%, that's more of a medium mountain. Some other hills, a bonus sprint at the top of 3 Ks, 5%, the Red Bull sprint, and then the 5.8 K, 6% to the line, little punch to the line. It's not a stage, like if you're Bora, are you going to control this whole stage to go for bonus seconds and the stage win? Probably not.
No.
Probably not. It's not worth it. But it might end up with a situation, Benji, where guys just start attacking because the breakaway's been caught, and then there's a bit of chaos.
My opinion is UAE will never do this strategy that I'm about to say, because it's considered too risky within the current sphere of cycling. But if you look rationally at the parkour, you've got a team with 4 riders in top 10 of GC. Yes, McNulty isn't looking that great injury-wise, so maybe 3.5 riders in the top 10 of GC. You've got a parkour with the second hardest climb in this entire race in the middle of the parkour. You can reduce Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe to literally just Roglic and Pellizzari on that climb if you want, based on what I've seen this week.
For sure.
The last 2 weeks.
Vine can do it. Just actually not even Vine, just Micah.
Yeah. So I see an opportunity here if I'm UAE, which I still believe they won't do because they're in 1 and 2 of GC. They've got a gap of a minute to Roglic. They feel comfortable up there. But there's an opportunity here to isolate Roglic and attack him with 3.5 GC riders throughout this parkour.
And I don't know whether it's their bike or they're not 60 kilo GC riders, but 3 of their 4 GC riders in the top 10 are really good on rolling terrain. Like Poggy's exceptional, but look at Del Toro in Strada. Look at McNulty on 5% 20-minute climbs. Ayuso too should be good on those. Yates is the exception. This is their parkour, and yeah, Bora's team looks not good. I mean,
yeah, except Pellizzari.
Except Pellizzari, but he's
really good.
And like you said, Benji, 3.5 in the top 10. It's use it or lose it.
Yeah,
you're not going to keep all 4 in the top 10, and they're only. What's the point of them being in the top 10? It's to be a threat.
They'll be gone.
Yeah,
into mountain stages.
Use it or lose it.
I agree.
Yeah, I think they should go. I mean, but then you're right. It's actually probably Bora thing, and let's take time back on them.
Or a lighter version of the crazy strategy we've said is if you just launch on the climb and attack with Vine and maybe one of the 4 GC riders, whether it's Adam Yates or something like that, and launch a lighter attack like that to see if it isolates Red Bull in their response. And if it does, then maybe the others can do something later in the race. Or you might end up with a scenario where a bloody EF starts riding behind you. Probably not, because Carapaz might jump with you. But some other team might take care of the work that Red Bull Bora should be doing because Yates is endangering their GC position. And then we've entered the GC fights for podium and top 5.
I think they got to go with one of Ayuso or Del Toro. Because then that doesn't happen.
They won't do it, though.
1 minute on Roglic, and Roglic is... You got to kill him, man.
Yeah.
They didn't kill him in Siena. And I was saying, they had the opportunity not to kill him maybe, but to take way more time. Look how much time when Vacek actually went back and started pulling, that gap went from 140 to 220 quick smart. If Ineos and listen, Visma didn't do it either, but yeah,
Simon Yates,
UAE are really trying to win the race. Like,
yeah.
They could have put more time into him, and they didn't. And I wouldn't. Don't let Roglic hang around. That being said, Roglic was stronger today.
Yep.
So, yeah. What do you? I actually think the break might go quick.
I think the break wins because I expect a passive peloton. I hope I'm completely wrong. From Carapaz, from Bernal, from riders like that, because those are the ones that I actually see doing shit like that. Maybe Caruso, you never know. But the thing is, I was gonna say about 2 weeks ago, I had stage 8 and 11 planned out for Marco Frigo. One of them he would win. He's not won stage 8. I would say stage 11, but that middle climb is hard, like hard. So I'm not sure if it's too hard or not for my man. So when I look at, it's kind of funny because we're now looking at the riders from stage 8 as well as potential contenders for stage 11, right?
Bardet. I think this is good for Bardet.
Fortunato.
Fortunato, but the problem is how does Fortunato win?
Dropping everyone on the big climb and doing a 100-kilometer solo, my friend.
On 5% gradients, perhaps.
Yes,
or with
sir.
a 20-kilometer false flat downhill valley where he's going to... I like Bardet because he can drop guys on the 6%. This reminds you of the stage where Remco did a 100K solo with Bardet in his wheel in the Vuelta. Don't know if it was a similar parkour, but yeah, I like Bardet. Slight uphill kick at the finish. You got to be able to climb. So
I think we shouldn't forget Plappy.
Plappy. If Plappy gets over that long climb, then he's golden. Because then same with Free. Then we're on 5% medium. Like then it's their terrain. But on that, if I'm Fortunato, if I'm Bardet, if I'm Zana, Paul Doublé, you got to go ham on that long climb. Maybe I think Jaco go with Doublé and Plapp, and then you got then he can sit on and Plapp can come back.
I think Picnic Postinel should put Max Pool in the breakaway. Nobody's going to look at a fucking Picnic rider going up the road.
Big Anzaldi. Bora should put Pellizzari in the break.
Yeah. Vatsek, why not? Little Trek.
Because you get dropped.
Yeah, but you might as well try and have some fun, no?
Chris Harper.
Did you say Bora should put Pellizzari in the break?
Yeah, why not?
He's the one rider that can help Roglic if UAE attacks him.
Let him go for the stage, dude.
It took me like 10 seconds to realize what you said. Prodom is interesting.
Yep.
I'm going Frigo.
Going Frigo? Yeah, I think the guys like Fortunato, I think they're not going to be able to shake the sort of 68 kilo climbers. I think Frigo is a good shout. I'm going Timon Aronsman.
Ooh, I like that. He's close in GC, so don't see it.
Tour of the Alps.
Before the Giro started, he literally said in an interview that it's not Pro Cycling Manager, so he probably won't be risking stuff like that in this Giro.
He has to.
I agree.
Because if he waits for the mountaintop finish...
Yeah, but Bernal is that guy as well, for raids like this?
Yeah, Bernal can climb.
Okay.
So, yeah, but look, if the same logic that Frigo applies... Aronsman did what Frigo did in Tour of the Alps, but twice as impressive. If he gets onto that rolling terrain, you can't bring him back. So, yeah, I like Aronsman for this. But yeah, that's the preview tomorrow. What's your rating on actual chaos GC action, Benji? Expectation?
Gotta say, I also like Chris Harper. But
yeah, Harper looks good, by the way.
He's been really, really passive in this race.
No, he attacked in Siena with Vatsek.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, but that's from the GC group. I mean, breakaway formation.
He's in GC, bro.
I mean, breakaway formation, and he hasn't been active.
Because he's in GC. Primoz Roglic also been pretty passive in break formation.
Red Bull Bora, you think Red Bull Bora Hunter is going to say, on my list, Chris Harper, not allowed in the breakaway.
Primoz Roglic wouldn't let Christian Scaroni in a fucking break.
Well, he's Christian Scaroni. He went nuclear earlier this year.
They don't let anybody in the break.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Tomorrow, I will laugh so hard. They're going to do it, Benji. They're going to do it. There's going to be a break, right? And it's going to have like 7 of the right 10 teams. Bardiani have missed it. Tarozzi's like, boys, Bora, I got to be in this. Let me across. They're like, sorry, break's gone. We can't let you. And then they'll restart the jumping on the flat for another hour.
One thing is certain. Wilco Kelderman is in the breakaway. There's hope on the internet that he's going to win the stage throughout the stage. But in the end, he finishes podium, doesn't win.
UCI points, let's go. Luke just reminded me that UAE have the pink jersey. Good reminder, Luke, producer, so that they're controlling break formation, not Bora. Well, in that sense, I think break goes quick because Jay Vine just goes in the break.
I disagree with that take.
I sort of agree that Bora will still do it themselves.
You know why Bora should do it? Because I believe UAE should be ones attacking in break formation.
UAE don't control. They have not done it for 2-3 years. They'll be like, we're just going to put Vine in the break.
What is this invented narrative of the leader's jersey needs to control? No, the person that is most vulnerable by a breakaway needs to control. And right now, Roglic is the one that gets isolated quickly. So his team is the one that, if UAE plays it right, which big question mark, I'm painting one right now in
I
front
think
of
they
you.
will. They'll go in with Vine and Arietta.
They should.
Or Micah.
They should do it with McNulty, Yates. You got 4 GC riders in top 10.
I agree. Like,
shove him in the fucking break.
Otherwise, what is the point of Yates just riding around at the back?
Yeah.
Because also, like, you either make Yates move up on GC so he's a real threat, or make him fall out of GC so he becomes just a domestique. Yeah, I agree with you, Benji. Okay, so I mean, it could be a good stage. The break formation will dictate it. I hope you enjoyed the recap, and we'll see you tomorrow with Stage 11's recap. Until then, ciao, ciao.